What's up, gamers? Long time no see. It's been, what, a month now? Don't fret, I haven't just been sitting idly by, and I can't wait to show you what I've been up to. Greetings one and all. It's the man without any plan, Soap. For anyone who is new here, I'm currently making a single-player FPS roguelike where you build your own gun piece by piece. Think of it as an unholy baby of Enter the Gungeon and Borderlands. I spent the last devlog polishing, making visual changes, and adding 2 new enemies to the game, but I was left unhappy with how the game felt overall. Playing the game didn't feel the way I wanted it to. I knew that we were still in the game's unholy infancy, but I started to get hit with doubt that my game would ever be good enough, no matter what I add or fix. Luckily, my friend asked me to send him a copy of the game. He took the time to play through it and pointed out the things that felt wrong. The player controller feeling slow and clunky, guns feeling pointless, enemies feeling unfair or downright dumb. I already knew the value of playtesting, but I was reminded of it when receiving this feedback. I couldn't have been more grateful for the reminder that, as a developer, I should be playtesting as much as possible. So, much like parents who have a second child, I decided starting from the top would make a better result. Of course, the base was still there, but I went in and tweaked things to make a second, unholier baby. I dedicated the first week of this month to fixing as many of the small issues as I could. A lot of visual things.
But so wasn't last devlog about visual change?
You'll shut up and listen when I tell you about the same things over and over again. Now sit back down in front of Grandpappy Soap and put on your listening hats. I added a lot of visual things. This animation that lets you know when you're too close to a wall was the first, but then I made the gun animations a bit more snappy and responsive. Plus, there's this brand new sprint animation with included speed lines to make you feel
Fast as fuck, boy!
Finally, I added damage indicators to let you know when you've been hit. Continuing on the visuals train, I spent time making 2 new rooms for the game. First, I made this challenging catwalk room that sits above a hangar. Then I worked on this engine room. Sometimes I like to come in here and just ponder the orb. What could it mean? Do you hear it calling to you? Yes, my orb. Excuse me, where was I? Right, fixing things. Now that we had some rooms, I wanted to add some more enemies. I figured now was the best time to add the first of the Legion soldiers. As of right now, the Legion soldiers behaved more like the sentry turrets, but they can run around and need to reload. But the basic idea was implemented. They still weren't feeling quite right. They're not dramatic enough when they die. I was tired of the enemies just disappearing, so I worked on adding a ragdoll system so that when they die, they fly in whatever direction they were moving in. I did this system by adding a script to every individual ragdoll piece that tracks when they are collided with and can pass that signal up to the damage script on the parent object. This way, I can also add critical hit points later by designating certain hitboxes as critical zones. But the siren song of working on visuals lured me away again. I know I'm supposed to be working on the game mechanics, but imagine how much faster I can work when I feel like the looks of the game are at least semi-complete. At this point in time, my game looked like what you would find in the dictionary under indie game, with enough bloom to put a French onion to shame. Despite the fact that I was using this toon shader to have unique visuals for the guns and enemies, it was going to waste on the world around me. The bloom washed everything out, even the bullets and lights. I was inspired by the game Hi-Fi Rush. Everything in that world looks like it came straight out of a cartoon, from their Ben-Day dots and their lights to the outlines that cover every object. I made this shader using Unity Shader Graph to do something similar. I gave every object a thick outline and wrote the shader that passes the bloom through a dots filter. But somewhere in the graph I messed up. As you can see here, all the glowing objects ended up with these weird black dots that ran through them rather than having the dots of the light go outward. It made the dots feel like they were these kind of 4th dimensional beings that my girlfriend compared to Chowder. You know Chowder? The hit 2007 Cartoon Network show about a boy who wants to become a chef? Chowder? Man, you young whippersnappers are making Grandpappy Soap feel old. Anyway, I fixed the dots by simply inverting this node right here that made the dots go from black to white so the bloom could take on the color of the bloom source. I also added in a similar effect to the one from Hi-Fi Rush in which, instead of shadows in the corners, they'd have sort of these drawn-on lines. Figuring out the shader to do this portion, it took me almost the entirety of a week, and I felt very smart when I finally figured it out. I followed this video by the Game Dev Guide and wrote this script that took the texture source of the original ambient shadows and passed them through this cross-hatching texture. Already, I was feeling very happy with the look of the game. I could see it in a state that I could call finalized. So with a few minor visual additions, like this pew to the gun and this blam when you kill an enemy, I was ready to move on to the next big stage. On the 13th of July, I uploaded my first playtest to itch.io, made private for the sake of the playtest, and announced it on my Discord server, of which you should join, link in the description. I will be uploading playtests at least once a month. I eagerly awaited the results, and while they weren't raving about my game in the press, people seemed to enjoy it. The results were pretty middle of the road, with most people rating it a 3 out of 5 on the fun scale, with people saying that the game was difficult and lacked variety among other things. I took my list of bugs to fix and suggestions to take into account and dove back into development. The motivation of having my game in front of others who now had expectations for the next playtest was pushing me forward. It was now time to address the main issue of my game, the issue that my friend from the beginning had pointed out, the issue as to why my game felt off and not quite like a game. There's no way for the players to know what the guns do, even if you meticulously swap through them all. Not only can you not figure out what it is you're doing, but you can barely notice a difference. All the barrels felt the same, stocks didn't change anything, max only changed how much ammo you had. The only aspect that changed how you play was the body. Were you going to go automatic or burst? Even that didn't really matter since they were practically the same too. My friend and I were discussing it for a long time and landed on the solution for my gun problem. Are you ready for this? The solution is, it doesn't matter. The game I'm making is stylized after cartoons and comics. I was so focused on modeling them on real gun behavior that I forgot I can do whatever I want. I can make a bunch of separate pieces that all change how you play the game, from crit sniper builds to unkillable Uzi lifesteal builds. The game is mine to be silly with as I please, as long as I stick in the extremely rigid sci-fi genre. So I spent some time going back through all my old code and reworking my scriptable objects for my base weapon stats. Third unholy baby is a charm, right? I made this intermediate script that I was able to put on every gun instance. They store the stats from the base object and then apply any calculations that you need to boost the stats. I then added this rarity system that randomly rolls a number and compares it to this loot table to see what rarity you get. The levels go from common, uncommon, rare to mythic, each getting significantly more rare than the last. So if common has a 50% chance to show up, mythic only has a 1%. To top it off, I used that stat boosting system to multiply all of the positive stats of a part by a certain amount depending on rarity. With that out of the way, I was able to move on to the final thing I was able to get done this month. Not counting all the time that was wasted while trying to do more visual things. I'm always doing visual things. I will always be doing visual things. I love visual things. I started work on the part cards that show you their info before you pick them up. This part was actually very straightforward. I threw together a quick UI mockup in Krita and then imported it into Unity, adding all the different text fields onto the UI. I then hooked them all up directly to the item pickup script so that when you hover over the object, it just sends an event along with all of its data over to the UI to display. I know this isn't exactly the safest code because any script that subscribes to the right event will just get that object and be able to modify it directly. So my game is super open to cheating, but I think that's a fair price to pay for an easy and simple solution to a potentially massive problem. Just don't cheat, okay kids? Grandpappy Soap would be very disappointed in you. It honestly feels like I wasn't able to get nearly as much done this month and like I disappointed you guys, which in a lot of ways might be true. But I'm working on this game only part-time as I have a full-time job. I'm not able to dedicate as much of my time to work on this as I did during my first devlogs. It is my personal dream to be able to work on this project full-time, but until a publisher wants to take a risk on me in my tiny game, I'll have to keep it as a passion project. Next month will be all about adding as much content as I can. New items, visuals, new enemies, more visuals, new rooms, visuals, and the long-awaited procedural dungeon generation. Oh, and more visuals. My goal is to have a complete demo done by the end of August, so I can join the upcoming Steam Next Fest. I think it will be a really good way to get more eyes on my game. For those of you that are still here, thank you for sticking around. Please make sure to like and share, as it helps me get more eyes on my game, and join the Discord server so that you could be a part of the next playtest. And subscribe to my channel to stay up to date on my devlog series. That's all for me, bye bye now.